Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. Of course, I was going to tell you about the continuing part to my series of analysis against Jay Garrison. So, of course, we left off at this very complex position where I was deciding whether I should develop my queen side a little bit more, bring out my bishop, my knight, or we sort of go in for the plunge right away. So what I decided, I played g4. Well, after it's white's move, of course, rook d2, and here I decided, let's go in for it. And after knight e1, I played f3. Maybe a little bit rushed for sure, but I went for it. I decided, you know what? Let's Hail Mary this. So after g takes f3, g takes f3. Now, my goal with this was after knight takes f3, I was going to play bishop h3 and go in the rook. The other hint was get my queen out this way, try to go for checkmate, also an option. But Mr. J. Garrison went with queen takes f3, and the next thing happened. Bishop g5. Threaten the other rook. Threaten the queen. So the queen moves back, and I decide, you know what? Let's not take that rook right away. Let's play bishop h3. Let's go for the other rook, right? This is a little bit confusing, but white has a defensive resource here. Bring the rook here, bring the rook here. Hard thing to see, definitely, right? I'm attacking both rooks, and one has to sort of realize, okay, what do I do? Do I just give up one of my rooks? Do I try to save all my rooks? What goes on, right? And so eventually white will come down to the judgment that, okay, this rook, maybe we could save it with knight g2, and after bishop takes, and queen here, there'll be a lot of pressure on that g2 square. So let's just save this guy, bring him here, threaten the bishop, also come here for defense against the rook. That's hard judgment, but eventually people get to that. Even sometimes I have trouble getting to it. So just to let you know, chess is not easy, but at the other side of the tunnel, there's always some fun waiting for you to discover. Let us continue. So our friend Jay Garrison, he did it. Rook d3. So I took an f1, king takes f1, brought my knight out. Come sliding in right in here. So after I talked about this defensive resource, now in this case, some people would say, let's bring out the queen first, and then let's bring the rook in, maybe threaten some checkmates down here. Of course, that's a plan in the position, but our friend went rook f3, and I decided, let's shut him down, right? Let's just keep our side. And so, of course, our opponent continues with rook h3, looking toward this pawn, maybe bringing the queen out, something like that. So I played queen e7, and queen h5 came on the board. Threat, just keeping an eye on this pawn. Luckily, I got this queen here. So then I decide, okay, let's bring out the rook. Let's double up, and then let's move this, and let's look at him. So knight f3 comes along, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I decide between two candidate moves, rook here or knight here. So I sort of think, okay, well, obviously there's no threat, right? I guess the knight could come here and come here, which would be really interesting of a threat. But after knight c5, knight h4, then what goes on, right? I have to think about what comes next. And I'm going to decide to trade the bishop and then play queen d7, threaten the rook, maybe bring the rook out as well, but that was my plan. Hard to follow. Let me show you. Knight c5, and after knight h4, I was thinking knight takes, a takes b3, and something like queen d7 could work. Well, no, queen d7, knight g6. Nah, I was thinking something like queen d7, but maybe there's even rook d3 as well. I like rook h6 with the idea of bringing the other rook to g8 as well. Love that idea, actually. So, even with the computer, you discover things. But let me give you a warning, right? You don't want to copy the computer. You want to understand what the computer is thinking, but you don't want to necessarily copy the computer because you will never get a computer to play a game unless you're playing against a computer. However, this doesn't mean that you should always rely on the computer for analysis, right? The computer is good as the double checking machine, but it's not your companion for life. It's something that you should lightly use on the side, but more or less exercise your own mind, because your own mind is the most important. So after knight c5, knight g5, there is a puzzle combination here. After bishop takes, queen takes, not going to stop the video, but you may if you want. Rook takes f2 check. Sets up that brilliant discovery, delivers a check on the king. King takes f2, queen takes g5. King f3, let me just bring the rook out. Let me just take that white's rook. Or maybe I should just deliver checkmate. So, JGarrison resigned. So what is there to learn from this game? Well, first of all, the idea of bringing your bishop to f4 and then to g5 really created some unnecessary moves, right? When I say you make a move, you should always have an intention behind it, and usually it should not be some unnecessary thing. If you commit your piece to one square, you don't need to hesitate about it. Just do it once, and only if there's valid reason to move it more than once, then feel free to. But if you don't have a reason for it, then don't move it. So after this, I got to play e5, and to me, I would have said maybe not take this just yet, because I feel like after the move e4, right, stopping me from playing e4, maybe this bishop could have had some use here. I'm not sure. I kind of felt like the bishop wasn't forced to trade. You're not forced to trade. I believe that if the white bishop captures here, there's going to be a little bit of a benefit for me. So, of course, when you're trading, you want to have a benefit for yourself. And so you want to justify that. So that is the goal. But we go on, and okay. Well, here's the thing. F3. The idea F3 is good, but on my part, I would say maybe I even rushed it a tad bit. Like, what about bishop g5? I would consider f3 next, but what if our opponent plays f3, you might say? Then we're going to play g3. And then you might think, what about h3? Ay, ay, ay. Well, this setup is bad, my boy. Because guess what? First of all, we can slowly go grind down that setup. Number two, these pieces are going to have to develop this way. And of course, it's going to be somewhat difficult to do so, given that you've sort of given me a blockade to block all these squares off of. So I think I would have delayed the push a little bit, but I guess it's okay. Bishop h3, maybe giving our opponent JGarrison a little bit of a defensive resource, but that's okay. Let's see. Other than that, knight f3, well, very minor, but maybe bring it to d3. Just some random preference. I'm not sure really how that improves that much, but I would say f3 wasn't the best square. It's hard to say. It's hard to explain why, but I kind of felt like f3, unless you were thinking about h4 and f5, I felt like it wasn't the best square to go to. Yeah, I don't know about that, but I guess we'll roll with it. With the discovery helped me out a lot. It gave me my freedom. So, let us continue on to the final game against JGarrison. I played a d4 opening. So, of course, this is what we call, I don't know what the system is called, knight c3, bishop f4, but I like playing it. I think it's a very interesting system. Bishop f5, e3, e6. So at this point, white has a few ideas. Bring the knight out, bring the knight in, play g4. Another idea is just to trade the bishops. Another idea is f3 and g4 and h4. Another idea is h3, knight f3, g4, bishop g2. There are so many ways you could play this. But I went knight b5, and now you might think, why am I breaking my own rule? Right? Why am I breaking my own rule of moving a piece twice? Well, here's a justification. It's not entirely valid, but I'm doing something as simple as threatening a fork. Now, you might think, well, you're just threatening one thing, right? Why are you still doing this? Well, let me tell you something. The knight is somewhat uncomfortable on this square. Of course, truly, I would like to push this pawn here, but this knight is doing more than just trying to attack this square. Right, so the goal of this knight is to keep the pressure on this square, but also to play something like c3 later and solidify the hat structure. So after bishop d6, protecting the square, I take with the knight because I feel like the bishop will stay strong. C takes d6, c3, and I start solidifying it. And I'll leave you off at this position for a last part against JGarrison. So I'll see you next time. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and keep on watching.